I just wanted to take a moment to welcome everyone. My name is Liz Kirchhoff, and I'm an adult services librarian at the Barrington Area Library. And I had a couple of quick things for you all before we begin today. I'd like to ask you to all make sure that you're muted, at least for right now, and that you keep your microphones off for a while. We have so many people on this call, on this presentation, that sometimes it really slows the bandwidth down and the noise in the background gets to be kind of a lot. So I'll ask you to stay muted. If you have questions, please use the chat box that is available at the bottom of your screen to ask. At the end of our program tonight, Sarah will leave some time to answer some questions. So I can read them to her, she can read them, and she'll be able to answer some of those as time will permit. I'd also like to take a moment to thank our partners at the Chicago Living Corridors. They have an email newsletter that might be useful to all of you. So in a moment, I'm going to go ahead and copy that information into that chat box that I just mentioned, and you will all see this pop up in just a minute here. If you'd like to sign up for their newsletter, just go ahead and click that link and you can go ahead and take care of that. Now I'd like to go ahead and introduce Peggy Simonson. She's one of the founders of Chicago Living Corridors, and she's on its board of directors. She's a longtime volunteer with Citizens for Conservation, one of the founding organizations of the Chicago Living Corridors. Go ahead, Peggy.
Good evening, everybody. I am thinking that tonight you're probably really glad that you're not having to get in a car and drive to a program with the weather out there, so you're just able to sit in your living room or wherever you're done. We're glad to have you join us. I know some of you have been participating in all of the webinars that Chicago Living Corridors has been doing since June. So I will be very brief with my introductory comments, but I know we have some newcomers, so I want to let them know a little bit about us as well. Sarah, do you want to do the first slide?
Can you see it right now?
We see you.
Okay. I did share screen.
You can read about the Chicago Living Corridors mission when Sarah gets that slide up. But in the meantime, I will just tell you there's three things about CLC that you really need to know.
Can you see it now?
We see your program. Maybe it's the next slide. There we go. This is our mission. But our goal is to increase the improved habitat on private property in the Chicago area. Next slide. And you need to know that we are an umbrella organization. We're founded to be a support for all of the organizations in the Chicago area that have programs that help residents improve the habitat in their yards. The ones listed here are the founding organizations of the Chicago Living Corridors. Next slide. And then since our founding, we've had these other groups join us, and as I said, each of these have a program that help people improve their habitat on their property. Next slide. The other thing about us is that one of our goals was to map all of the properties in the greater Chicago area that have improved the properties. And of course, our goal is to create a corridor of these properties. I'd like you to know that this map on the chicagolivingcorridors.org website is interactive. And so you can go on and look to see which organizations are which color. You can see how they're in different groups. The green, for example, is Citizens for Conservation, my organization, but we've got them all around the Chicago area. So if you have property that you think qualifies as good habitat, you would need to contact one of these organizations to get connected with them, because we don't, as an individual, you can't just call us and say, put your dot on the map, but you can do that through an organization. And the Chicago Living Corridors has the names of the organizations, the contact information, and lots of other good resources, including videos of our previous seminars. You go on to chicagolivingcorridors.org and go to resources, and under videos, all of the programs are there. And tonight's program is also going to be recorded. So you don't have to keep track of every single thing Sarah says, because There's going to be lots of good information, but you can look back at it. It's not going to be tomorrow, but in a few days we'll have this video up as well. And we are very thankful that all of our presenters, including Sarah, have agreed to let their programs be recorded so that we have that as a resource for you in the future. So with that bit of an introduction, let me introduce Sarah. Some of you know her. Sarah Michehl is the Community Engagement Specialist with the Land Conservancy of McHenry County. And she has spent the last 20 years learning and working in the environmental field as an educator. She has a personal and professional interest in sharing with others the functionality and joy that comes with incorporating native plants into any property. She's had the opportunity to visit over 200 properties as part of the Land Conservancy's Conservation at Home program. That's one of the programs I was talking about that gets their dots on our map. She also really likes dogs, kids, reading, and insatiably researching just about anything. So we are in for a great treat tonight with all of Sarah's great knowledge about native shrubs. Sarah?
Thank you so much, Peggy, and thank you everybody for joining us tonight. Yes, this program, we are going to be focusing on our native shrubs and how important they are to our local habitats, and also how beautiful they can be in your property. The Land Conservancy of McHenry County, who I work for, we are a nonprofit land trust in McHenry County. So we're just northwest of Chicago. We've been around since 1991. And our main goal is to preserve and take care of land and support landowners who want to do the same thing. And there's all different ways that we do that. So I'm going to suggest that you go to our website to learn more. It's conservmc.org. And you're also going to get my email address at the end of this program. So I encourage anybody to reach out if you have questions about native shrubs, plants, whatever it is. All right, so with that, let's get started because I have a lot of information to cover tonight. All right, so why do we care about replacing these native, we're going to focus on shrubs tonight. So there's the obvious things that they do for our landscape. They're providing shade and a windbreak, creating oxygen, storing carbon down in the soil. They're stabilizing our soil. They're, preventing erosion. We're also going to be adding a lot of beauty and wildlife support. Okay, so that map on the left there, you can see some drastic changes, and this is specific to McHenry County. And this is the oak distribution from 1837 to the early 2000s. And with the oak distribution, that incorporates a lot of different shrubs as well. So this is a good way to see what used to be covered by trees and shrubs in this area. And this is pretty indicative of the entire Chicago area. So what used to be covered was in the light gray. What remains today is in the dark black. So we've got 13% of what we had at the start of settlement in this area. And a lot of that, there's a lot of reasons why. Settlement brought with it, a lot of timber removal. And obviously a lot, as time went on, neighborhoods were developed, roads were put in. So a lot of things were removed to do that. And we also, and this is a big one, started to use a lot of non-native plants and shrubs on our property. So this is what I hope to do tonight, is to inspire you to remove some of those native or non-native shrubs and replace them. So things like buckthorn, yes, European buckthorn. I have gone on site visits and seen this very beautifully manicured. It's not just growing in the woods, but very beautifully manicured and used in a really kind of formal setting, like you see here, native to Europe, Asia, or our honey, the non-native honeysuckles. Okay, I'm going to give you suggestions for things to replace our non-native honeysuckles or the burning bushes. All right, all of these, the reason that they're an issue is basically birds eat the berries, they fly somewhere, land in a tree, they poop, and out comes the berry, and then these plants grow, and they tend to grow unchecked. They don't have the controls on their population here in this native in the United States that they would in their native range. So it's just really important that we don't let them form this monoculture and that we promote biodiversity, lots of different kinds of life, because with lots of different kinds of life comes lots of stability and health in our ecosystems, from mammals to birds to insects to the microbiology happening in the soil. Oh, here's another one, Japanese barberry. Yep. So, all right, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on these non-natives, but there's just so many far-reaching reasons to start to consider replacing these. And I always tell people, don't freak out. I think you got to rip everything out at once. Do it little by little, you know, as it works for your property. All right, so before you start on this, it's important to think about it. Think about a plan of where will these native shrubs work on your property. So you're going to need to think about how much space do they need? What are the soil requirements? How much light do they need? Don't plant trees and shrubs right over where you've got a bunch of underground utilities. If you've got overhead power lines, think about what are the mature height of your shrub going to be, because there are a lot of shrubs that can get 25 plus feet tall. Okay. I tell people to think about their property as a whole. So is this area going to potentially, maybe someday you're going to want to put a vegetable garden in there, or a shed, a swing set, something like that. All right. So try to really think about the way you use your property before you just start throwing things in the ground. Don't plant trees and shrubs over septic fields either. Okay. It can just interfere with those. And stay away. This mainly applies to trees, but don't plant trees right up against your foundation. Avoid anything hanging over your gutters. That can create a lot of problems. And this little graph here is a nice, or this little graphic is a nice kind of, gives you some dimensions to keep in mind, especially the small trees section. The 30 feet or less would really apply to our shrubs. All right, so let's start talking about the actual plants, because that's the fun part. I'm going to go from biggest to smallest. All right, so on every slide, I list the growth dimensions, the sun requirements, and the soil requirements. All right, and there's a lot of these that are pretty adaptable, and I'll say that on the slide if they are. So I'm starting here with the pagoda dogwood. Oh, and if my screen is in your way, you can grab me and move me out of the way or minimize me, so you don't even have to see me and you can just see the picture. All right, pagoda dogwood. This, I absolutely love this shrub. You're probably going to hear me say that a bunch tonight. This has this absolutely gorgeous architectural kind of growth pattern to it that resembles an actual pagoda, which is where we get the common name from. It is in the dogwood family. It has beautiful, and you can see here, beautiful white flowers on it. I really, really like this one, either as an understory shrub, or it can even be considered a small tree. They will sometimes grow multi-trunked. In the woods, they look absolutely beautiful in the woods in early summer when they're blooming. I also like them as a corner kind of anchor planting in the corner of a house or something, as what's called a specimen tree or shrub. A specimen tree or shrub just means it's like this thing to feature. It's not hidden in a hedgerow. It's like being featured for its beauty. And when these pagoda dogwoods are planted that way, they really stand out and are able to be shown off that way. The one thing about these that I want to make sure people know, they are not going to handle harsh afternoon sun very well. So they can do morning sun pretty well, but harsh afternoon sun, they're going to get like this kind of blistering and discoloration on their leaves. They're an understory woodland shrub, okay? And they can do anything from medium soil to moist soil. So medium soil, just think of that as like blacktop soil, okay? And moist soil, I wouldn't say standing water, but they can do really rich moist soil, okay? Here we go. Okay, so there's the beautiful flowers that you can see there. They're just really gorgeous. These berries are loved by wildlife, okay, especially birds. So what's really neat about replacing the understory layer in our woodlands, and you can just do that in your neighborhood by putting them in your house, is you're restoring that layer level of the entire woodland ecosystem. And different kinds of wildlife need to exist and live at different levels of the ecosystem. Some birds like to live and forage for food and nest on the ground. Some like to be 15 feet up. Some like to be 50 feet up in the canopy. So we have so much buckthorn and non-native honeysuckle and all of these things that have overrun and taken over that layer. We put these back in and we put them just in our yard, and wildlife is going to just be so thankful. And the picture on the left there is Dorothy Robin, who's a conservation at home property in Woodstock. She loves her pagoda dogwoods so much, that's right outside her front door, that she decorates it with ornaments. And I just think that's really cool. Okay, so service berries. This particular shrub is one of my most recommended to people when they have space for it, just because it's so beautiful. You can see it's got the showy white flowers on it. And one thing I want to mention is that pretty much almost all of these shrubs I'm going to talk about tonight, there's some variety, like cultivar variety of them in the horticultural industry. So you're going to find a million different kinds of service berries out there. Tonight, I'm featuring the straight native species, and I encourage you to use the straight native species whenever possible. There's a lot of insects who really benefit from the straight native species. So the caterpillars are able to eat the leaves of some of these host plants much more effectively than they would be from some cultivated variety that either changes the flower shape or changes the leaf color. So use the straight native species when you can. All right, service berries. They are a host plant for so many different butterflies and moths, 91. That means that their caterpillars can eat the leaves, okay? So we're supporting all these different stages of the life cycle. The nectar and pollen is, used by bees and wasps and all kinds of other stuff too. Berries can be eaten by you and wildlife too. I suggest using these beauties as a specimen shrub when possible, but they can also be incorporated into a hedgerow, a mixed border, an anchor shrub again. So you can, plant this at the corner of your house to kind of soften that sharp edge. They're super adaptable as far as sun and shade goes. They can do either. They're not going to be happy in like moist or wet soil, but they can pretty much do dry to medium really well. Make sure you've got room for them. Okay. They are going to get tall. So 25 feet by say 15-ish feet wide. So they've got really nice fall color. I love the yellow color. With all of these shrubs, pretty much the more sun they get, generally, the more brilliant their fall color is. That's just a young serviceberry there. That one's only probably, I don't know, 4 or 5 years old. These are not super fast growing shrubs at all. But you're going to attract so many beautiful birds. Cedar waxwings like this one here. Tanagers, buntings, all kinds of birds will be attracted to these shrubs. And here's just one example of one of the butterflies or moths that like to use this shrub as a host plant. So that little caterpillar there is able to eat the leaves of this, okay? And then go through metamorphosis, make a cocoon, turn into that beautiful adult butterfly or moth. All right, so now we're down to our witch hazel, which, okay, I don't have this one on my property, but it's on my list for this spring to put one of these in my property. They are so gorgeous. Okay, so let's start. They're really slow growing. Again, use them as a specimen shrub. Put them in, you know, a shaded kind of understory area if you've got a wooded area. You can mix them into a hedgerow as well, but I think they're the most stunning when you can see their form. They're going to get pretty tall and pretty wide, you know, somewhere around 20 feet by 25 feet, whatever. This is another one that's going to need shelter from the harshest afternoon sun. So they'll be fine east facing, you know, east facing or north facing. Just protect them, you know, from the harshest afternoon sun. Dry to medium soil, I would say, so not wet. All right, so this is really neat because witch hazels are some of the latest blooming shrubs in our area, and they get those crazy spindly flowers on them that you could see in the upper left corner there. And this picture, I took this picture, I don't know, in like December. I visited my friend's property in Bull Valley and just stared at this shrub. The structure of it was so cool looking and beautiful. And this is in December. You know, if a shrub and the structure of it catches your eye and looks gorgeous on a cold, dreary, gray day, then you're like, all right, this is something to pay attention to. Just a really graceful kind of branching structure. Okay, so black haw viburnums. These are, so the viburnums, there's a bunch of different native viburnums. So these look really similar to the nanny berries, but can tolerate a wider range of growing conditions. Nanny berries like it pretty wet. Okay, these black haws can do a little bit more. They could do dry, they could do medium, and they can do pretty moist too. So they are going to, when you put them in the full sun, they're going to flower really heavily and really beautifully. The berries eaten by birds, all of these shrubs, all right, the berries are just invaluable to wildlife. And they're also this dense kind of growth structure, especially in something like this, is going to be invaluable to those birds that nest at lower levels, okay? Obviously, the flowers are going to be nectar and pollen supporters as well. This shrub, now I've heard a variety of reports on the amount of suckering they do. I've been to some properties where they sucker like crazy. So what that means is that they pretty aggressively spread and shoot out all around their base each year. All right. Sometimes that's a good thing. You want that to happen, especially if you're trying to create a privacy hedgerow, right? And then I've seen that really happen in the more moist, like medium to moist situations. In the drier properties, I haven't seen it suckering quite as aggressively. Okay. They can do sun, they can do shade. They're going to be about 15 feet tall and 12 feet wide. All right. And then here's another one. Okay, so 9 bark doesn't aggressively sucker at all. This is a really common shrub to use in a hedgerow or for screening purposes. And you can see why from this picture. This is, I think this is like 2 9 barks, probably. These are pretty old here. This is from one of our conservation easements in Crystal Lake. They have a very beautiful arching habit to them, which makes them just absolutely beautiful. And they create a nice dense cover in the summer. All right. Really nice white flowers on them, 12-ish feet tall, 15 feet wide or so. Pretty adaptable for their growing conditions, dry, moist, sun, shade, which is really, really nice. You've got really nice fall color when they're exposed to a lot of sun. These are young 9 barks. This is my yard here. I don't know, those are like 2 years old or so. And they get really cool fall color on them. And their bark, if you look on the left, is really interesting in the winter. It's got this kind of striated, papery look to it that's really nice when you get up close and look at it. That's what I really love about a lot of these native shrubs. They're very unique, and they encourage observation, and they encourage you to stop and look. And that's, that's just really neat, especially in the winter, right? We're like, you don't just have to look at plant catalogs in the winter. You can go out in your yard and look at this stuff. Bless you. Okay. Next, we have the American cranberry bush. Some people might know this as high bush cranberry. Okay. I need to spend some time on this shrub because there's a lot of confusion around this one. And I've got 2 more slides on this with identification features on it because we really need to talk about that. All right, first, this is not a true cranberry, okay? It's a viburnum. Whatever, it doesn't totally matter as far as you're concerned. Those berries, technically they're not berries, they're drupes, whatever. The little fruits down there, those little red fruits are so beautiful. That's another picture I took in December, and you can see the road behind it. So that's a road that I drive down all the time. And I noticed along the fence line these beautiful red fruits. And I happen to know the guy that lives there. And so I called him up. I was like, can I stop by? Like, what are those? I want to take pictures. And because I couldn't tell from driving past so fast. All right, great. They're the viburnum trilobums, or American cranberry bushes. And so those fruits are so noticeable that I was seeing them, noticing them driving down the road. So he makes jam out of those berries too, which is kind of cool. This shrub is excellent to use in a mixed hedgerow, again, planted on like the edge of your woods if you have one, or you can use it as like a specimen shrub too. They're going to be about 10 feet wide, 15 feet tall. They're a little bit loosely branched. They're not as dense as like that black haw viburnum or the 9 bark. They're going to be happiest in medium to wet situations. So if you're like in a dry gravel area or dry sand, really sandy soil, this one probably wouldn't be a good pick for that. Let's talk about some identification now. Okay, because the European high bush cranberry, which are the leaves on the left, that is an extremely common landscaping shrub. It's non-native. It is invasive, okay? I can tell you when I moved into my property, I don't know, 9 years ago or something, we've got a little pocket of woods in the back, and I'm in like a regular neighborhood where tons of people have that European high bush cranberry in their landscaping. I pulled out tons and tons of these that had grown out of control. All right, so between that, the buckthorn and the honeysuckle, it was awful. So I want to make sure that you know how to identify the difference between the European high bush cranberry and the American one. All right, you can see the leaf difference. It's pretty obvious. The American one on the right there, its leaf margins, that's just the edges of the leaves. They're hardly toothed at all. All right, can you see how they're kind of smooth, right? Whereas on the left, when you look at the margins on the leaves in the European one, they're a little bit more jaggedly toothed, okay? Here's one thing though that I do need to mention, and I actually didn't know this until I started doing research over the last year about this. They will hybridize, the European and the American, okay? So that's like a risk that you take if you put the American one in. All right, so then another way that you're gonna ID this shrub is by, and this is so confusing, but I'm gonna try to break it down. It's the petiole glands, all right? So where I want you to look right now is on the right. That's the European one on the right. There's a little inset kind of in the middle of that right graphic where it says, look here on the leaf stems, not here. Those little petiole glands are right at the base of the leaf itself. Petiole, that's just a fancy botany term for that long, skinny part of the leaf that attaches to the actual stem, okay? So the petiole glands are just these little glands that are on the petiole itself. So on the European one, those glands are going to be, they're going to appear to your eye, they're going to appear flat or sunken in, concave, all right? On the American native version, those tiny glands, if you look on the left, are going to appear domed or convex, all right? You guys, this is really difficult to see this in the field. This is hard. And I can tell you that I've been to native shrub sales in the past, over the past 20 years, through conservation organizations that are selling what they have labeled as American high bush cranberry, and they actually end up to be European, because it's difficult to tell the difference, especially with their ability to hybridize. Okay, so this is just something that I like to teach people about, and it's really like being an educated consumer. Okay, on to the hazelnut, which, you guys, this is probably maybe my #2 most recommended shrub outside of the serviceberry, because it's just got those beautiful flowers and you can eat the berries. The hazelnuts though, oh, all right. So in the I think it's the 1837 survey, whatever, the historical surveys, when this area was first being settled, the surveyors made notes about the plant life, okay, that they encountered. And hazelnuts were the most common understory shrub found in our woods and out in our prairies too. We need hazelnuts back in our lives, okay? So if you have a need for a privacy hedgerow, put some of these babies in there, all right? Mix them in, all right? Like mix them in with some 9 barks and a bunch of the other shrubs I just talked about. They are a host plant. People don't think about this with hazelnuts, but they are a host plant for 113 different kinds of butterflies and moths in the Midwest. So many caterpillars are able to eat these leaves. That's amazing. Obviously, the hazelnuts themselves, the nuts that you get, are extremely high wildlife value. Tons of different things are going to eat them, from birds to mammals, all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's to the point, I've got a bunch of hazelnuts in my yard where I've ripped out a ton of burning bush and I've put in a bunch of hazelnuts. I'm like, ooh, I'm going to get hazelnuts and do like cool culinary things with them. Yeah, the squirrels get the squirrels get them way before I do. Like the squirrels get them when they're green, like they're not even ripe yet. Anyway, so use them in a hedgerow, use them in a thicket, chuck them in your woods, you know, as an understory shrub. 12 feet tall by 12 feet wide, that's conservative. They can even get bigger than that if in the ideal growing conditions. They could do full sun. I think that's when they look their most beautiful. The more sun they get, the denser they're going to grow. They can do shade too. They're just going to grow a little bit leggier, and they can do dry to moist soil. And all right, this is the shrub that I freak out about early in the spring, like March. I'm out there looking at the catkins. Those catkins are the bottom right there, that little dangly thing. In the early spring, those start to swell, and that is the structure that releases pollen. So you can flick them or the wind blows them and pollen is released. And then that crazy thing on the left there, that's the flower. All right, so that's the female part that will absorb that pollen basically from all different hazelnuts, because with these, the more hazelnut shrubs that you have planted, the better nut production and pollination you're going to get, which makes sense. Okay, so those tiny flowers, and you guys, those are so small. I'm like, you can see that's my hand down there in the bottom right. You can see how tiny those little red flowers are. It's so fun to find those in the spring when there's nothing else happening. And then pollination occurs, and there's one of the hazelnuts up there in the right, and that's not ripe yet. That one's green. But I'm telling you, the squirrels start taking them even when they're like that. All right. Usually it's like September or something when they're totally ripe. Yeah, the squirrels are taking them in like August. Here's what they look like. And these are some young guys. These are probably, I don't know, 4 years old or something in my yard. So much beautiful fall color in the full sun. I mean, this used to be like 30 feet of burning bush, which has gorgeous fall color as well. Don't get me wrong. But these, I'm talking golds, burnished kind of orange and yellow, just absolutely stunning. I have people that come over that don't care about plants at all. And even they're like, what is that? Like, that's a gorgeous shrub. And I'm like, oh, it's native hazelnut. So this is a really nice one. And it's really easy for people to kind of get this one. Like, everybody knows what hazelnuts are, you know, so. All right, here's another one, elderberries. All right, so elderberries, beautiful, not meant for small spaces. This is another aggressive one that suckers a lot. I made the mistake of putting an elderberry in kind of a small space, and I regretted it. Like, I had to move it, and I'm still dealing, like, I don't know, 6 years later with the little suckers that pop up all over the place. So these, we find them a lot just growing remnant out in the woods, but they can do full sun in, you know, wet areas. They're super adaptable. They can do just about any conditions. I find them in standing water, like wet areas. I find them in dry upland woods. Like, they'll grow all over the place. They have really, really beautiful flowers here that you could see in like June, which then turn into those beautiful fruits in August, which are just bird magnets. And then There's people who make jam and stuff out of them too, which is really tasty. You got to add a lot of sugar to it. Those berries don't taste good when you just eat them. All right. But again, this is an aggressive suckering shrub. So just beware. I did a site visit once where this gentleman, he lived in an area in Wonder Lake that was remnant oak savanna. I mean, he was in a normal neighborhood, and his whole back fence line was nothing but elderberry, and it was stunning. Like it was absolutely gorgeous. I was there in like August or something, and it looked really, really cool. They're not going to give you a ton of privacy in the winter. You know, they can be kind of openly leggy growing like that. So just keep that in mind. I like to encourage people, if they're going to make a hedgerow, to use multiple species together. That can, for one thing, it promotes diversity. So you're going to be supporting lots of different kinds of wildlife. And for another thing, if some crazy pathogen comes through, whether it's an insect pest, a fungus that focuses on one particular species, if you've got a bunch of different kinds of things in there, you don't lose your entire, hedgerow or something that way. All right, spice bush. These are so pretty too. So they prefer it moist and I'd say kind of part sun situations. They can handle some sun in the afternoon, but they're going to be happiest, I'd say, in a part sun to shade and moist area. I mean, where they grow in the wild is usually along river banks, shaded, kind of woody, wet areas. They're gorgeous. Let me go to the next one. They're gorgeous early in the spring. That picture on the right was taken around Easter. So, middle of April or so. Those really cool little yellow flowers come out all along their stems there. And these are shrubs that are known as dioecious. Whatever. That just means you need a male and you need a female in order for the berries to be produced. So I don't know. I've got like 2 or 3 spice bushes. Apparently they're all males. I don't have any females in there or something. I don't know. So anyway, I don't get any berries. Or maybe it's the other way around. Whatever. When you buy a spice bush, don't get just one. Buy a bunch of them. Okay, buy like 3 or 4 or something. You can't tell their gender at the nursery. So usually you just got to buy multiples and hope that you get, a male and a female. Okay. Those berries are so rich in fats and nutrients for birds. They're invaluable during, this late summer time when they're really putting on weight for a migration period. They are also the host plant for 3 different kinds of swallowtail butterflies, which are really beautiful and large and showy, and people like finding those. And yeah, all right. Okay, winterberry. I don't know if anybody here has ever been to Bolo Bog, out on their bog boardwalk when it was open. There's a bunch of winterberry in that bog. So with that said, winterberry like it pretty wet. They are a dense thicket forming shrub. Okay. So if you've got they can do medium soil too. So regular blacktop soil, they can do that as well. They're going to grow pretty thick, and they can grow a little aggressively, especially when it tends to be wetter. All right. So they're going to look their best when you mass a lot of them together, not just like a single shrub. When they shine is during the winter, when these beautiful clusters of berries are shown off. as long as you see it before the birds get all the berries. They're gonna grow kind of leggy and open. So they look best when you've got a bunch of them kind of massed together. So this is another one where you need a bunch of different ones. They're dioecious. So you need a male and you need a female shrub in order to get the berries. If you plant this one in drier soil, you're gonna have to water it. Don't do that. Plant a shrub that's right for your conditions, okay? Who wants to have to do supplemental watering? Nobody wants to do that. There's a shrub for every growing condition, okay? Okay, coralberry. This is another one that's on my list that I want to do in my own property. There's not very many shrubs that can handle dry shade that are small shrubs. This is one of them, and I'm going to show you another one too in a minute. Coralberry is going to sucker, okay? So aggressive and not for tiny small spaces. Whenever I say that word suckering or spreading by rhizomes, you're like, okay, I'm not going to put this in a tiny small space. So they form these dense colonies and they have kind of a arching habit to them. Obviously, again, the fruits loved by wildlife. These are great for erosion control. So if you have an area that's like going down, you know, a sloped area going down to like a creek or something, and you just removed a ton of buckthorn, these would be great to keep that soil from just running off. Because a lot of times when you remove things like buckthorn and honeysuckle and burning bush, it's just open bare soil that's there. So it's important that we replace, you know, what was there to help control erosion long term. So at their maximum, these are going to be, they're not going to get that tall. They're going to stay under 5 feet. Okay. They're pretty adaptable in their growing conditions as well, between sun and shade and medium soil and that kind of thing. They get very inconspicuous. You'd see in the upper right corner there, inconspicuous flowers. So that's not when this plant is showy and like at its best in the summer. It's in the fall and winter when these look the best. This picture here was taken by one of my conservation at home people, Logan Gilbertson, at the Morton Arboretum just recently. He took this picture. So I don't know, in December maybe. So that's how showy that is. How cool is that to have winter interest, right? From these shrubs as well. If you prune it down in the, I think it's like late winter, if you prune it down, it's gonna do more of a mounding kind of habit to it. If it's still got a ton of berries on it, I wouldn't prune it. I would let those berries stay and let the wildlife have their way with them. Okay, dwarf bush honeysuckle. I'm obsessed with this one. This shrub can handle so many different growing conditions. It is so tough. I love it as a foundation shrub. All right, so a foundation planting is just like you need something to cover your ugly foundation. And it again softens these edges. So you can see here's an example of this shrub being used as a foundation planting. They look gorgeous when they're massed together. You don't plant just one dwarf bush honeysuckle. These groups you see here are groups of 3 of them. So 3 and 3 and 3, all kind of grouped together. That's when they look full and beautiful. It's going to sucker, all right? The way that this homeowner, who happens to be me, controls the suckering here out into the lawn, just when we mow the lawn, we just run over the suckers, super easy, okay? And I started by planting it, I don't know, maybe 4 feet away from the foundation, and over time, it is just suckered out towards the lawn, and I control it, it's perfect. What else? Oh, it's not a true honeysuckle. I know everybody freaks out when they hear that word. It's not non-native. This is a native shrub that you would find growing in rocky, open woodlands, basically, but it can flourish in just about anything. Sun, shade, dry, medium, not standing water. Okay, it's not going to do good in super wet conditions. But this is like really not good foundation soil here. Okay. I mean, on the other side of my house, I have this planted and it was awful. Clay, chunks of gravel, just weird stuff. And I threw it in and basically hope for the best. And it's flourishing in those conditions. All right. This one, beautiful, small yellow flowers in June or so, I think, in the summer. So many bees, so many bumblebees. Absolutely love this one. It's really, really cool. So this is one that's going to stay under 5 feet, which is really nice because there's not a lot of truly short native shrub options. And this is one that can do a whole variety of growing conditions. All right. And then we've got, I think this is our last short shrub, New Jersey tea. I'm laughing because I have a love-hate relationship with this shrub. So in the years where it looks like this, it's glorious. Okay. It's phenomenal. And it's a showstopper. And people are going to stop in the street and be like, what is that? Because it's short. It's like 3 feet tall. And it's super well behaved. This thing's not going to sucker at all. It stays like where you put it. But then there are other years where it just randomly doesn't grow. It's like not leafing out. It's not doing anything. Sometimes rabbits like to gnaw the heck out of this thing and girdle around the whole base of it. And you're like, all right, you're dead. Like what? I don't even know what to do with you. And you just leave it there and the branches all break off. But then the next year, it randomly starts to resprout again and looks nice. So with New Jersey tea, don't plant it in a place where it's a focal point. That's what I have come to learn. Mix it in with other plants, all right? And if it does wonderfully, celebrate it. And sometimes it's just not going to. Some of these native shrubs can be a little finicky. New Jersey tea is a really high quality conservative species found in open prairies, especially really kind of gravelly places. I can tell you that when this thing does bloom, usually it's around the 4th of July. It is covered with pollinators, wasps, just the most gorgeous wasps that you've ever seen. Tiny, tiny insects that I don't even know. I have no clue what they are. They're so tiny, just covering these shrubs. And it's glorious to see it when that happens. Okay. If you're going to plant this one, cage it. Cage it at least the first year. Okay. It's going to do best in full sun. It can do part shade or part sun too. Dry to medium. Don't put it in like a wet, moist area. All right. Okay. So a couple planting and care tips for, well, any shrub or tree, not just native ones. Avoid the mulch volcano situation that we commonly see, right? In like random strip mall parking lots and stuff. Don't do this, all right? Don't do this to your trees or shrubs. That mulch just like super heats up and holds heat and moisture up against the bark. There's no oxygen transfer that's able to happen. The roots can like grow all wonky and be like growing into the mulch instead of down. It just screws everything up. So you don't need to do that. You don't have to use any mulch when you plant any new plants or trees or shrubs. What we encourage people to do is if you want to do something, you can use leaf mulch, just put a bunch of leaf mulch around your trees or shrubs, and hey, it's free. You don't have to buy anything. Or use plants as your living mulch. Okay, so here's an example of one of my most recommended living mulch plants. And whatever, just have it in your garden and stuff too, because it's going to cover the soil. Wild strawberry. I love it. All right. So this is commonly found in the woods, but it can do full sun. We'll find it out in full sun areas all the time. It's okay. Here's what I want to point out. That picture on the left, do you notice how those leaves look a tiny bit chewed up? That's what you want. That's showing, hey, this plant is being used. Insects are eating it. That's what we want. But do you notice it's not in an overwhelming way? It's not decimated the entire patch of wild strawberry. This is a balanced system happening here. There's predator insects, there's prey insects. That's what we want. And then on the right, you can see how that wild strawberry looks really beautiful too, even in the late fall. When the more sun it gets, it's going to turn that kind of bright red color, which is really pretty. Wild strawberry spreads by those runners. I use it in small gardens. Super easy to control those runners. Okay. And yeah, you do get cool little strawberries that you can eat, and they taste really good. Not like the non-native mock strawberry, it's called. Those don't taste good. Okay, those taste like weird cardboard. All right, another living mulch option, common violets. They're not weeds. They're not some undesirable plant, okay? They stay low, they carpet the soil, they spread beautifully, which is what we want, but they are not inhibiting the growth of other native plants, all right? So common violets, a lot of times people have them like in their lawn or like back randomly behind their garage or something in like a forgotten place. Dig them up, put them around your trees and shrubs. You can do shade or sun. And Pennsylvania sedge. So this is an experiment, this picture here with these darn New Jersey tea shrubs that you can see down in the bottom right corner there. I have a problem with the rabbits eating those New Jersey teas. So I read somewhere that rabbits don't like putting their face down in the sharp kind of foliage or leaf blades of those sedges. I'm like, all right, I'm just going to do an experiment and put these sedges all around this whole planting of these, like, I don't know, 5 New Jersey teas that I have. So far, it's working. I mean, it's only been like 3 years, I think, so I don't have enough time for it to be like valuable data. But so far, it's working. But Pennsylvania sedge is, it's that like flowy grass looking thing of beauty. This would have been one of the most common plants found on the woodland floors. So this plant, the other name for it is oak sedge, would have just been everywhere in our oak woodlands. It can do sun, it can do shade. It is meant to grow around our native trees and shrubs. Okay, and it looks beautiful. And there are so many designers who are starting to use sedges now in formal landscape design. And I'm really excited to see that. It's super well behaved. They're phenomenal. And I can't say enough about those. Here it is here. Okay, so here is Pennsylvania sedge in like early April when nothing looks good and everything looks dead. and just like drab. And I was on a site visit, and these people had this really sharp sloped area with these gorgeous oak trees. And they were just like, my grass won't grow. My lawn grass won't grow. I don't know what to do. I don't want to mow this hillside. And they had this beautiful planting of this flowy Pennsylvania sedge planted all around their oaks. And they didn't even know that like they go together, they're friends, they're associates is what it's called in the plant world. And they have a nutrient exchange system. So the sedges and the oak trees over time through fungal connections exchange nutrients. Like that is phenomenally amazing. So not only are they like, oh, I don't have to mow this anymore, super, and I don't have to deal with my grass not being able to grow anymore, but they're actually helping their oak tree too. And this goes for almost all of those shrubs I talked about today. The service berries, the hazelnuts, the elderberries, like tons of these can handle, will flourish with having these plants planted underneath them. Okay. All right. So just a quick planting tip when you're actually planting your tree or shrub, it's not so much about planting the hole super deep. It's actually about going wide and kind of loosening up the soil and giving it plenty of space around it before filling that hole back in. All right. That's like the main important part, basically. And then if you've got a bunch of deer and rabbits, cage them for the first however many years. Like I just took my cages off in my woods after 4 or 5 years, I think, because they're big enough now to be able to withstand deer browse or whatever. And watering, it depends on when you plant. If you plant in the spring, definitely water them a bunch for like the first month. A few times a week, water them deeply and thoroughly, not blasting them for 5 seconds with the hose, but think gentle, deep, long watering. If you plant them in the fall, you don't have to water quite as often. Okay. And here's just some information about our Conservation at Home program, which is one of the programs that shows up on that Chicago Living Corridors map that Peggy showed us in the beginning. And this is a program that was started by the Conservation Foundation years ago. And basically, it's just a way to support homeowners who want to put native plants in their yard and maybe take some non-native stuff out. And so we come out and we do a site visit for you and give you suggestions if you want them. And if you've got a bunch of native plants or some, you don't have to have a bunch. If you get some native plants in your yard and you're working on removing invasives, you can qualify to get a yard sign, which is a really cool way of talking to your friends and family about what you're doing. Here in McHenry County, the fee for the program includes a membership to the Land Conservancy. And we are a nonprofit organization, and member support is how we do the work we do. All right. And the same goes for the Conservation Foundation and the other organizations who are administering this program. So if you have questions about if you live in a different county and you're like, I want to do conservation at home, and you don't know who to contact, shoot me an email and I will put you in contact with whoever can help you with that. Okay. All right. And here's some resources. Where to buy these trees and shrubs, both in person and mail order options. All right. So we do a tree and shrub sale along with native plants too, in the spring and in the fall. So there's information about that on our website. It's a local pickup. And then there's other nonprofit organizations that do tree and shrub sales too, like Friends of Bolo Bog, Citizens for Conservation. I've bought, things from all of them, and they're fantastic quality. Okay, locally grown, they're great. There's mail order options. Those 2 books that I listed, The Native Plants of the Midwest by Alan Brandhagen, that one, it's huge, it's big, but man, does it have wonderful descriptions of the shrubs and how to use them in a landscape setting. Okay. And it's got plants in it too. It's not just the woody stuff. And then there's a bunch of online resources. So the that ChicagoRTI.org Healthy Hedges brochure that was put together in conjunction with a bunch of groups. That's a really, really good brochure that anybody can download. Illinois Wildflowers has a ton of information. Morton Arboretum, if you have any questions about pruning these shrubs, I suggest you type in the name of the shrub with the word Morton after it. So I would type in like hazelnut, Morton, and they're going to give you some pretty valuable pruning information about them. I refer to that all the time. And then some other things down there too, like our Facebook group that we administer through the Land Conservancy called Learn. That's for anybody to post questions on there and we'll jump on and answer them for you. With that, my marathon shrub information. I wonder how far over did I go? 7 minutes. I wonder if we have any questions. Do we have time for that? Do you think, Liz?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. So do you want to read them or would you like me to read them for you? What's easy for you?
If you want to read them, that would be great.
All right. Let's see what we got here. This person is wondering if black haw will survive beetles.
Okay. So here's the thing about like the viburnum borers and all these different insect pests. What I have found in the research that I've done, because I don't run across it all the time, like on my site visits, people having issues with these, but every once in a while I do. And what I find is that, and the literature supports this, is that if you plant a shrub in a situation where it's going to be stressed, it's going to be less likely to resist things like insect pests. So if you take a shrub that really wants to grow in standing water and you plant it in like an upland, rocky, sunny situation, and then it might look okay, but then some insect pests get a hold of it and it's just going to die. Okay. So I really suggest that you don't force a shrub into a situation it shouldn't be in unless it's listed as one that's got high adaptability, you know, for all different situations. So that's kind of the best suggestion I have for like the viburnum borers and all these other insect pests is plant them where they should be.
Sarah?
Mm-hmm.
Can I add a little piece here?
Sure.
Your slide said that the American high bush cranberry, which is a viburnum, isn't affected by the borer. But I had they absolutely ruined mine, and mine was right, you know, along my stream with a wet area where it wanted to be, and they'd been there for years. And then the borers came in and just took them out. And Morton says to clip off the ends of the branches that the borers are on. You can see the little bumps on the stems. And I was clipping and clipping and clipping, but I couldn't save them.
Yeah, that's really unfortunate. And this, you know, there's no good answer for that. So, you know, there's a perfect example, Peggy. You've got it exactly where it wants to be growing, you know, and it still happened. So sometimes it's going to happen. I think we can try to create these multi-leveled ecosystems as much as we can to harbor predator insects and prey insects as much as we can. But I mean, I'm not the kind of like landowner that's going to be out there clipping and doing I don't have time for that, man. I'm not going to be able to be out there doing that stuff. So yeah, so take it with a grain of salt, you know.
Plant
So
service.
this is a question that goes beautifully with that segue you just gave me. Judith is wondering if you can talk about some bushes that don't need annual trimming.
Oh, you don't have to trim anything. You know, any of these native shrubs, you don't have to trim them. You know, like 9-bark, I think 9-bark looks best when you don't trim it and you allow it to achieve that beautiful arching habit. You know, it's all about your particular situation. Like New Jersey tea, you're not going to trim that. You know what I mean? Like you're not going to do that with that one. So you don't have to trim any shrub. I don't like doing that just because I don't want the work. You know, so it just depends on your neighborhood, I guess.
So Nancy wonders how far apart should she plant the male and female spice bush?
Okay, so I think I'm trying to remember the number. I think if it's less, if they're like within 30 feet of each other, the wind pollination is effective. And it might even be more than 30 feet, but I think I remember reading that with hazelnut too, that if they're within that certain size, they'll be fine. And you know what? I don't know. I've got them more than 30 feet in some situations, and the hazelnuts do pollinate each other. So I would use that as your kind of rule of thumb, but you don't need to be out there with like a measuring tape or anything.
And then Jim has a great question. He wants to know what can be friends with all of his black walnuts.
Okay, great question. Pretty much everything native can be friends with your black walnuts. Your vegetable garden plants won't be, like the non-native tomatoes and stuff. But pretty like, okay, Morton Arboretum has a great article about this. So if you just Google black walnut toxicity Morton, you're going to get the Morton Arboretum article. And it's going to list everything that can handle black walnut toxicity. And you're going to be like, whoa, it's all native plants and shrubs. Look at that. Because it makes sense, right? Ecologically, they've evolved together over thousands of years. So the juglone, or whatever the chemical is that those black walnuts give off, those plants aren't affected by it.
My elderberry love being under black walnuts.
Nice.
Any thoughts on chokeberry?
Yeah, all right. So there's so many shrubs that I didn't put in this presentation that deserve to be in it. And it's just time constraints. I mean, I could talk to you for like 4 hours about these shrubs. Yeah, yes, Aronia is a great one. Chokeberry, that's another really nice one to put in. It's like the medium height group. Yes, you're gonna get the beautiful little berries on there. It's gonna be kind of a thicket former. It's okay for privacy. It's a little open branched, so it's not going to give you dense privacy. I've seen cultivar ones that are planted in extremely formal landscaping situations, but I don't know. Personally, I don't do any of the cultivars. I just put all the straight native stuff in. So it would be great in like a mixed hedgerow or something.
Okay. And then Mallory's wondering, would you add soil amendment for the pagoda dogwood?
No, I wouldn't, but I don't know. And people might disagree with this. I don't baby these shrubs at all. Nothing. None of my plants or trees or shrubs get babied. I try as much as possible to match the habitat type, you know, to the shrub itself and or tree, whatever, and let it go from there. I've never had to put any kind of soil amendment in. The thing that I will do is put, you know, leaf mulch around them, which I just like grab from corners of, you know, my yard or wherever, and plants. So the pen sedge, the violets, the strawberry, I get them going around there. And plus I don't want to weed. I don't want to weed under my shrubs. Like that's not fun. It's hard enough to weed in an open garden, let alone under your shrubs. So get those plants in there to compete.
Kind of funny that Caitlin says that hers grew under a downspout and just didn't care.
Yeah. Yep. There's some that'll just love that. You know, elderberry would love that. Oh man. I wouldn't put elderberry so close to a house though, necessarily. That one can go nuts.
Bush. Any thoughts on button bush?
Love it. Okay, so this is one that I like really, again, could have featured if I had had more time. Yes, buttonbush is phenomenal. If you've got wet, buttonbush needs wet. It can do part sun. It's going to be happiest in sun, and they get big. Give them space, okay? And they grow pretty fast. I mean, I am shocked at how fast mine have grown along my creek. And they get the just beautiful dangly little button flowers on them. Cool butterflies are attracted, but give them their space. Don't cram a ton of them in together, because then you can really appreciate their form, but they need wet.
And can you recommend anything for deep shade?
Pagoda dogwood. Yeah. Pagoda dogwood definitely is going to look beautiful in deep shade. Serviceberry can do deep shade too, and will still look nice in deep shade. There's another one that I didn't feature in here. It's a lot taller than a lot of these. It's Blue Beach. I don't know. It's got some other names too. It's Carpinus caroliniana. That one is going to look gorgeous in deep shade too, but it's going to get tall, like more than 30 feet tall, and it is multi-trunked. I've seen that one in certain areas of McHenry County where it's the right rich woodland soil. It's phenomenal looking. Okay, so those will do great in really deep shade, but make sure they've got space. Okay.
And Anne's wondering, she planted a lot of elderberries, hoping that the deer would leave them alone. And she's wondering if she has to cage them.
It's up to you. I mean, elderberry are pretty sturdy. So it depends on the deer pressure. It depends on where you live, if you've got crazy deer pressure, like where your arborvitaes, when you look around, like the arborvitaes in your neighborhood are all just like gnawed off. So there's tons of deer pressure, maybe consider caging them. But a lot of elderberries, even when they do get chewed down, they just completely resprout like crazy the next year. So it depends on like your investment, your financial investment, your physical investment in planting them. Like, you don't have to cage them. I've got some out in my woods that the deer have eaten down, and they just come right back. So.
Okay. I feel like I got all the questions, but I might have missed some. I don't know if you want to open it up at this point, or what would you like to do?
Oh my gosh, there's a lot.
Let us take a little time to talk about the program, the next one coming up.
Yes.
Certainly.
Next slide. Nope. Well, this is what Sarah's been talking about as we've been going through the program. But one of the things that we had suggested for those of you, I saw a question or two about where Conservation at Home works. Join a participating organization, and you can, get the help you need for specific questions or the whole big yard visit, if you'd like. Next slide, we have another program coming up in February. And this is about the actual designing of a native plant garden. Sarah gave you lots of good tips about that, but the presenter is Monica Buckley, and she owns a landscape design firm that works just strictly with native plants. And so you'll be hearing about, some of the, if you are a landscape oriented person and, know about sort of landscape issues like height and variety and whatnot, those would apply too, but she's going to specifically be focusing on how you do that with native plants. One of the issues we run into sometimes is having native plants that are too large for the front yard, and people think they look weedy. And one of the ways to deal with that, of course, is to pick the right plants. There are lots of good native plants. And as Sarah was saying, some of them, like the New Jersey tea, is very well behaved. And so those kinds of things can be used in a landscape design rather than just like an open prairie or an open woods area. Anyway, good program. It's going to be on February 25th. That's another Thursday night at 7 p.m.
And the registration for that is already open. So feel free to go on over to our website at balibrary.org and you can go ahead and register.
And here is Sarah's contact information. She said she's willing to take additional questions if you run into them. So she's at the Land Conservancy of McHenry County
Just the Land Conservancy of McHenry County.
.org. Yeah.
Yes. Perfect. So one question I just saw, Liz, in here that we didn't cover was, are there any wet shrubs for privacy? Yeah, there's a ton. Like black haw would be fine, or nannyberry. I mean, nannyberry would be great if you've got space for it. They can get over 20 feet in some certain situations. So I think nannyberry is like viburnum. I think it's lentago. So that would be a great one. The buttonbush, the dogwoods, which I didn't even get into the wet dogwoods, like gray dogwood. That's a aggressive thicket former. So only put that one in if you've got space. Elderberry. There's a lot of amazing wet shrubs that we have. So if anybody has questions that I missed and didn't get to, just feel free to email me. It might take me a couple days to get back to you, but I will. All right. And let me know what questions you have. And, you know, Chicago Living Corridors is a great organization to get connected, to find your local land trust or conservation organization, whatever it is. So definitely visit their website and check that out too.
I might also suggest, we didn't talk about this, but on the ChicagoLivingCorridors.org, under resources, there's lists about the kinds of things that you should have to make sure that the variety of, not specific plants, but all the different categories. Some things for birds with, like having water and having you know, both the seed plants and the berry plants and so forth. A big long lists that you can take a look at to see how your own property compares to what the ideal would be.
Perfect. And are people that registered for this gonna get the recording? Yes.
So I can certainly do that. I have recorded the whole thing. It'll be up on our YouTube page through the Barrington Area Library. Also, I believe Chicago Living Corridors will have it on theirs. I'm also more than happy to email the links to that and perhaps to your slides if you're willing to share them to the group as well. So whatever is useful.